Hello, what is going on, guys? Huggy Guy 1 here. Welcome to my review of Spies in Disguise. So, Spies in Disguise is directed by Troy Kwan and Nick Bruno and stars Will Smith, Tom Holland, Rashida Jones, and Ben Mendelsohn. The story is basically about Lance Sterling, who's this cocky secret agent, and he thinks he can know around basically, and he does end up losing this briefcase with a drone in it to this guy named Killian, where he ends up pretending to be him, which causes the rest of them to like go after him because they think that Sterling actually did it because of how Killian was pretending to be him. So basically, he ends up having to come with Walter Beckett to try and disguise himself, but it ends up being into a pigeon, and basically they have to go and try it and defeat Killian as trying to get away from these guys to try and prove kind of his innocence while he's kind of like blending in as a pigeon. So the story does work for the most part. I do like the whole idea of kind of like disguising himself as a pigeon and kind of like fitting in with the pigeons kind of thing, and that does kind of bring a creative concept to the whole spy kind of thing, and as kind of becoming a pigeon, like kind of blend in, and I do like that idea. And also, just the whole going after Killian part of it, of the story was part of the story that I liked, and I do feel like it makes sense and it was pretty well set up, and does make sense as it is kind of like the whole spy kind of routine, and I do feel like that part was where most of the entertaining parts came into the story. Structure is really good. I do like how it kind of starts off with kind of introducing Walter Beckett and what exactly his character is, and I do feel like that's a good job, kind of like introducing his part, and as well as kind of like introducing Lance Sterling by kind of like showing him on this whole mission kind of thing with the briefcase, and I do kind of like that, as it does kind of like introduce you to his character a bit, and it does pretty much work. And there's the second act, which I do really like, how he ends up going to Walter and then to trust him, to kind of turn him into invisible kind of thing, but it does end up turning him into a pigeon, and that's where like a lot of this really works, and I really like how they do stuff with like the whole flock and just how it kind of like works as a pigeon, and I do really like that, especially with a lot of these gadgets from Walter in the second act. It does really kind of keep you into it, and especially like when they get to Killian, they kind of like use breadcrumbs to go after him. It's pretty cool. And then there's the kind of like climax of this movie, which I did like how they kind of like use all of Walter's things to get against Killian, and it does end up working, and especially since Dan Killian does end up surviving it. And I really like how they do that, as it does really work for this story, and I do really like how they do that to really emphasize how Walter just doesn't really want to kill anyone, and he doesn't really feel like it's right, and I do really like how this movie does end and wrap up with like how Walter and Sterling are kind of the higher back, and I do feel like that makes sense for this whole movie as ending, and it does wrap up this movie pretty well. Pacing is really good, as this film does feel complete, and it does kind of like feel together, and it does feel like it ends up going to the runtime, as it does really work for this movie. Walter Beckett is a really well-written character, as he is one of our protagonists, and I do really like how his character is. I mean, he's just really into science and really just wants to find new ways for the whole spying, and I do really like how his character is, and he just wants everything to be safe, doesn't really want to hurt anyone, so he has all these weird gadgets, and I do really like how that's his character. I mean, it just makes you feel like him, especially since he's really smart. I like that kind of character, especially like how he just doesn't really want to hurt anyone, even Killian, who's like hurting people and doesn't really want to hurt them, so he ends up saving him in the end, and with like this whole hug thing, and I do really like that. I mean, it just really shows his character, and I do really like how they do this to kind of make a kind of creative concept for spying. I also really like Lance Sterling's character as, and it does really kind of work as basically, and he does kind of like start out as a little cocky, may seem a bit unlikable, but I do really like how his character progresses as he does over time learn to trust Walter more, and how he is as first really like his gadgets as, I mean, they're kind of weird, so he wouldn't really think much of them, and then over time he just kind of like learn to appreciate Walter more as he does help him come back to him, and he does appreciate him more over time, and I do really like how that relationship grows throughout this movie, and it does show some really good progression with Sterling's character in that kind of case. Voice acting is fantastic. Will Smith and Tom Holland especially have a lot of chemistry. Will Smith especially is really feeling like Lance Sterling, each line delivery like really confident. Same thing with Tom Holland. He's just really confident in his role. Same thing with Ben Mendelsohn, like as Killian. He does really try in his role, and he does give an intimidating feeling and really feeling villainous whenever she's delivering his lines, and he does really feel like he's into his role, and I feel like he definitely does do a good job. I kind of found the humor to be mixed, but like some of the humor that I did find funny kind of came in while he's a pigeon, like while he was transforming into a pigeon, there were some funny jokes and incidents, and I do feel like they mostly land in that scene, especially in that there's some scenes as well when he's a pigeon that they use kind of funny jokes, and I do think that some of them do land for sure, and I do like how they kind of do them, like how they have to do it like a pigeon kind of thing, and how he kind of just trying to be part of this flock is like, it's kind of funny, and I feel like some of those scenes that were kind of funny, and I do feel like they did a pretty good job with them. The animation is fantastic, especially in the character design, like the humans, they do a pretty good job with them, and they do kind of have the smooth feeling, and they do look complete, and they are very smooth when they're moving, and I do really think that they look complete, and then as well as like the pigeons, the kind of feathers on them, they did a good job animating those, and to kind of make them look smooth and look kind of more, they kind of been animated better, and it does kind of look complete, and I do especially like some of the background designs in the animation, as especially like the place where Killian adds, I mean that does look really good, and it does look very clean, and I feel like most of the backgrounds do really represent where they are pretty well, and I do feel like that you're kind of more into it, but the backgrounds kind of being animated, and do feel like you're into it, as they do kind of like match the kind of scenes that they're kind of in. That said, this movie does have its negatives. Like, I do think there are definitely some problems with how the kind of subplot, but kind of like secondary plots in this movie, like how Marcy is kind of like going after Sterling, because I do feel like just the setup of that's just, I feel like could have been better. It just was more of a simple misunderstanding cliche, and I do feel like that could have been delivered a bit better, and I think that it definitely could have been set up a bit better. Definitely sometimes, like, during that subplot, I do feel like it can be easily forgotten and isn't really much, and I do think that it's just simply something like audience knows more than the characters kind of thing, and I do think that could have worked, but I feel like just it is too subtle, as a lot of it kind of like relies on humor, which I'm going to get back into later. And there's also like the kind of misunderstanding cliche right before the climax, which is kind of typical for a kids movie. In this movie, yeah, they didn't really do it very well. I mean, it didn't really make sense. I mean, it was just completely random, as before this, Sterling was like kind of like trusting Walter more, and all of a sudden she decided to send him home, and it just feels like it just didn't need to be there. It just felt like it was just a simple misunderstanding cliche that just sets up the climax, and I feel like that they could have done something else to set up the climax. But luckily this is a movie where the payoff is a bit better than the setup. And to be honest, I wasn't really too big on Marcy's character. I mean, I wish they did a little bit more with her, as basically it's just the simple misunderstanding cliche with her, and it just, I just do feel like they did develop her. I mean, she did end up realizing that it wasn't Sterling, but like it just feels like that just happened because the plot wanted it to. Is basically she just noticed it when after a while, and I just feel like just they could have done more with her character than what they did. Alien is basically just your generic villain. I wish they definitely did more with his character. I mean, it's just that like his motivation just isn't really much. I mean, he does want to kind of like use this briefcase that has drones in it to like take control of many people's bodies, but like they don't really give him much of a reason why other than he's evil, and it just I wish that they definitely could have given him a better motivation and kind of fleshed out his character a bit more. As I said, the humor was mixed, and some of the ones that don't really land are like the ones where they kind of use kind of audience knows more than the characters kind of thing as a joke. Like, I do feel like those kind of jokes don't really land that much, especially like when they kind of have how they say it's kind of the pigeon, the choice signs of pigeons, but it's like they kind of use jokes then when I feel like they don't really need to. And same things like with a lot of that investigation, they definitely do use jokes like when they step in yum, and I don't really feel like they needed to do. And just kind of like just jokes there to make them look stupid, and it's just I wish they didn't do that. Same thing with like there are some scenes with Kimura in this movie that they just weren't really funny to me. I mean, he does show a few jokes that just really aren't that funny just in that one scene that they used him. Overall, even with its issues, Spies in Disguise is still a great movie, and it's honestly kind of underrated if I'm being honest. So I'm gonna give Spies in Disguise an 8 out of 10. That was my review of Spies in Disguise. What are your thoughts on Spies in Disguise? Tell me in the comments below. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.